Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I appreciate that each of you guys have busy schedules, and incorporating some time for this conversation is something we're grateful for, that you've made some time for that. So, as Kelly said, my name is Cyril Mathai. I lead our strategic solution team here at Trintech, and what that essentially means is, as we look at strategic ways or technologies to join up with to drive a better offering for the CFO, I focus on those type of initiatives here at Trintech. Prior to coming to Trintech, I was actually a customer. So I'm an accountant by trade and have leveraged Trintech technologies to drive the transformations that we are talking about today. And depending on if you've joined any of our other webinars, many of the discussions stem from some of the experiences I've personally had, either driving transformations in my own roles or as I've been here at Trintech and working with customers across the globe in our teams. So our agenda, as it wraps up, as we look at the agenda today, our discussion is really focused on what Kelly talked about. One is, what are those challenges and the expectations that CFOs have, and the expectations that are being placed on the CFO, and the challenges to be able to support them. And then the trends that we're starting to see coming up in 2022 that CFO teams, not just the CFO, but the CFO teams really should be looking towards, subscribing towards as well. And then something interesting that we decided to add into our conversation was, as the CFO organization or the CFO themselves begin to look at how they become performance driven, and maybe admittedly some of that's also in becoming the CFO of the future, what are the key traits that the CFO and the CFO teams, the constituents of those teams, need to begin to possess in order to be successful in not only driving a transformation of the finance organization, but driving a transformation of the overall organization to compete in a new day that we're all learning and becoming. So as we look at some of those challenges that we are understanding for 2022, I think in times of crisis and insecurity, everyone, including internal staff or C-suite executives, investors, and other stakeholders, look to the office of the CFO for financial guidance and, even maybe more importantly, reassurance. And this has never been more true, as it became equally important to hear from the CFO, or to have that CFO voice within leadership and kind of out in public as we dealt with the pandemic. The pandemic did, however, expose not only outdated systems, but also outdated processes that weren't able to be adaptive for changing needs. Those changing needs not only were about how we work, but also what we were working on. And unfortunately for many companies, the pandemic also created a resource crisis with people and or cash, which is unfortunately impacting and had impacted and continues to impact very important decisions and investments that need to be made. And as many of us know, historically, the finance function is underappreciated, and it's also widely understood, as we stem through the last 2 years, that the function of finance is more critical and is changing and shifting into a more strategic value for the organization. So how do we enable that organization becomes a topic of our discussion today. Today, CFOs are ready to push their businesses to be more competitive, and they know why they need to be a different organization tomorrow than what maybe we are today. And that means a broad-based approach and pulling on as many levers as possible with an intense focus on people, digital transformation, and ultimately leading us to real-time data that we can make decisions on. So CFOs can expect that the current war on talent to accelerate in the coming months. The reality is that there's been a mass exit, and many of you have felt that mass exit as you see peers disappearing, also as new peers enter the workforce. But even maybe more importantly, the shortages that we've seen, the stress, the efforts involved in trying to maintain staff levels and bring in new people, not to mention the enablement of those and onboarding of those new resources that are coming in. But that reality has also directly diminished the strength of our company's culture. And in PwC's August Pulse survey, that they released last year, nearly half of the CFOs polled cited loss of corporate culture as the biggest challenge of hybrid work. In fact, it's reportedly a greater concern among CFOs than it is across all the other executives in their respective firms. The CFOs are seeing the need to act fast to support finding the right talent, effectively onboarding new employees, and then proactively investing in retaining those hires and the other people that are there for their organizations to thrive in that hybrid workforce and environment. CFOs have another worry around people, which is related to that turnover. 8 out of 9 executives said that they are experiencing higher than normal turnover right now. So it's no surprise that 81% of CFOs are concerned that high turnover and labor shortages are going to impact their company's revenue growth. Why are people leaving? More so than their peers, CFOs think that the ultimate driver for leaving has been around better wages and salaries. Even though the CFOs may not want to make the extensive changes to comp structures because they don't necessarily feel like turnover will last long term. Having said that, 45% are somewhat concerned about turnover and say it will return to a normal rate soon. Another alarming point that came out of the survey is that CFOs are concerned that the growth for their organizations will be limited if they can't find a solution to the labor shortage issue. Investment in digital transformation has been a top priority for CFOs throughout the pandemic. And as many kept digital investments safe from cost cuts, reallocating resources and even accelerating some of the investments were also top of mind. And in fact, according to the same PwC survey that I just spoke to, 56% of the CFOs said that tech investments would make their company better in the long run. CFO bets are starting to pay off as their investments helped make their companies more agile and able to handle the huge shift to remote and hybrid work. The success that CFOs have seen is giving them a higher degree of confidence in continuing to get the technology angle right as their companies more fully embrace a hybrid workforce model, which the majority of CFOs say is part of their company's plan for the near future and long term as well. But still, CFOs want to see that transformation happen even faster, where 68% are investing in digital transformation over the next 12 months. And this is a continuation of what CFOs have been doing really over the last 2 years to drive an accelerated revenue growth plan. CFOs also see technology as far less of a barrier to making hybrid work successful than many of their peers across the business. In fact, in that group, the non-CFO group, 44% say that technology isn't necessarily a challenge versus 26% of all of the respondents. And more than 2/3, or 67%, are also investing in cybersecurity tools and training. And as many companies make the move to hybrid work environments, cybersecurity or digital risk remains a top concern. And more than 1/3 of CFOs say that not having effective cybersecurity measures in place becomes a challenge to driving a successful hybrid model.